Hello and welcome back to Language Sofa Podcast. So here is the space where we talk everything languages, and today I am joined by special guest Ryan Cockrell, and we are here to talk about everything MFL and his journey into language teaching. Okay, so Ryan, welcome to Language Sofa.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
No, you're welcome. So I wanted to talk to you about your experience in languages, which is very extensive and a very interesting journey you've had. So it'd be really good to know what initially got you into languages.
So in terms of at schools and stuff, I finished university and my degree was forensic psychology. So it wasn't really the plan, to be honest, as a teacher.
Yeah.
But I had a really good relationship with the school that I went to. They'd always been very good to me. It's a school in Coventry. They were really, really good to me. Mm-hmm. And so they'd offered me a job sort of in the summer, when I finished university.
Yeah.
So I always went back and TA'd. And then when I finished at uni, they kind of said, well, what do you think about doing like a year of unqualified teaching? And then we'll put you through teacher training. So I suppose in my mind, I was thinking, well, brilliant. I already speak Spanish. Yeah. So I'm sure it would be okay learn how to teach. But they said, you need to train in English, maths or science.
Okay.
So I'd always liked English and I'd done quite well at A-level. So I thought, well, I'll just try that. And so I sort of spent the first year as an unqualified teacher doing a little bit of Spanish, mm-hmm. and then mostly English. And then it kind of started from there, but I ended up really as an English teacher because in my second year then I could only teach English because I was doing my training. And then by the time I finished my training, I moved schools and I was employed as an English teacher. So it was kind of, the plan that I'd had to be a Spanish teacher had totally gone the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I was now teaching English sort of full time. And I think it might have been in my sort of second year at this new school that, what it's like at schools where maybe a teacher's ill or, a teacher's moving school and they need someone to kind of fill in.
Yeah. Comes up with an opportunity in a roundabout way.
Yeah, exactly. And, the skill set was there. And so I sort of went and spoke to the head of languages at the time. And I think it's one of those things, I don't know if you've ever had this, Ben, where, because your name's Ben Levi, my name's Ryan Cockrell, and they say, oh, Ryan can speak Spanish.
Yeah.
I think they assume it's going to be not very good,
They make an assumption that you're just going to, I'm going to put a bit too much of an Essex twist on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I sort of turned up to this kind of almost like an interview, really.
Yeah. To
see, can you do it? And obviously, luckily for me, I'd grown up in Spain. So my Spanish, I like to think, is very, very natural. Mm-hmm. It's, the thing that the only thing I can't really relate to a lot of our students about is that I've never really actively learned a language. In the same way that we try and teach it. So, so kind of had the conversation and, the standard reaction that I'm sure you get all the time when you're in Spain is, well, I think you probably look a bit more Spanish than me, mate, to be honest.
I used to have really blonde hair, so I was El Guiri always, That was my thing I got labelled with. But
that was the same for me. But I sort of had this David Beckham ponytail, a double ponytail when I was a kid. And so not only was I, a Guiri, but also everyone just assumed I was a girl.
Right.
All the time for 3 years.
Right.
So I just kind of ended up doing it that way. And then sort of ended up veering off back into English again after this opportunity and progressing like you do at a school when you're, when you're dedicated, you get opportunities, don't you? And so one of the opportunities I had was to do a maternity cover as the department lead for English in various capacities. And sort of coming off the back of that, I suppose you get to that point in your career where you're like, what am I going to do? Am I going to carry on with English, which is, something I've come to love, but it was never really why I, 7 or 8 years ago came into this kind of thing. And then the head of languages job came up and I thought, well, I don't know what it would be like to, have only taught Spanish, at varying levels to then go and be head of languages. So I thought I'll just apply and see where I got. And, it went well. And like I say, I've got a huge passion for it. And from then, I suppose I had the task, like everyone does when they take over a head of languages job or a head of English job. You've always got the task of implementing your own ideas,
Of course, yeah.
and changing things. And again, a lot of things in schools, like any job, there's always like room for improvement on everything. So it was in a pretty good position. Like any school, Ben, it was in a pretty good position.
Yeah.
And then depending on how you spin the narrative, there's either lots to improve or not much to improve, depending on whether you agree or not.
Of course, yeah. And we all want to go in and do our bit and put our stamp on it and all that stuff. But it's nice if you have a good platform to start from, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, like anything, change is always good. And in schools, it's essentially unavoidable that you need to change. So I'd kind of heard of Conti from my first kind of exploration of languages when I was just starting.
Yeah.
And I've got to admit, like, I don't want to offend anyone. I didn't realise it was named after a person.
Right.
I'd never, because I didn't go on any of the training courses.
Right.
I'd just been to another school in my area that was hosting like a languages meet.
Okay.
And they were just talking about Conti in passing as if it was like something that all language teachers must know. And obviously I didn't want to say, guys, can we just start again?
What's going on here? Yeah.
So it wasn't until like I started teaching again and got that head of languages job after sort of stepping in the year before and teaching, that, I kind of went on the first course really and had it explained to me. And then you imagine my shock where, it's presented by Conti, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's a person.
Yeah.
Okay, it makes sense. And then from there, I was just all in on it. I just sat in that day-long session, and I was just like, this is everything that I'm already aware of about teaching and about memory and things like that, and like psychological research. Everything that I'd done since I was 16, doing psychology A level and then psychology at uni. I was like, this is the answer. This is how people learn.
Absolutely.
And so my automatic assumption was, well, this is what everyone is surely doing already. So I need to learn this to kind of
keep up. Yeah.
And then, the surprise when people sort of aren't doing it or aren't aware of how it works, and you've taken for granted something, that the opportunity to listen to somebody, an expert, speak about something, it's not always afforded to everybody. So we invested pretty early in kind of training sessions into this kind of new way of teaching. And my first port of call was to do a lot of reading, and I had a really supportive like SLT link above me who gave me lots to read, and was really invested in the journey as well. And, we had a lot of things to do to kind of make it our own. And there was this just brilliant article by, I think it's Hannah Pinkham, and it was about writing, I think writing letters in the curriculum to like this sort of imaginary Spanish kid.
Right.
And I was just super inspired by that. And I was like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And I was like, we're going to make every lesson is going to have some sort of like communicative function that a kid can leave that day and say, when they get home and they go, I mean, very rarely I imagine they use it. But exactly. If you're in a situation in a Spanish speaking country,
that's what I'd say resonated with me as well, when having lived in Spain as a youngster, like you said, you haven't necessarily learnt the language, you kind of acquired it more, I suppose, through being in it. So like the way it's just purely communicative. It's it's just building towards real life situations where you can actually communicate. That's what sort of captured me. I was like, oh yeah, this actually makes sense. This is actually how languages are learnt. And that sequencing and even the kind of the way it's chunked down, the way it's actually then developed into sentences, not just individual words, all that stuff. That's exactly what resonated with me as well.
Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? Where so I grew up in Alicante, so the Valencian community, and we had to do Valencian in school. So you kind of, you had a Valencian lesson where you'd learn Valencian. So I suppose I learned that in a way that you might learn a language. But we also had to do, like, science was all taught in Valencian as well.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
So they didn't teach that in Castellano. They did that.
No.
Oh right. Okay.
No, it was. I've still got all my textbooks. They are fascinating.
Yeah.
From like year 3.
I think I've got them in the loft as well. They're interesting.
And you've got you'd have like your lengua castellana lessons, and then you'd have like so you'd go to like science. They called it something, I can't remember what it was now. I have to have a look. But yeah, it was all in Valencian. So like
Yeah.
all of my rudimentary knowledge of like photosynthesis is
Yeah.
like all in Valencian.
Oh,
Which I can't
exactly.
speak.
Yeah, it's really, and also, yeah, like the thing I found in school that was really interesting was like thinking back to it in terms of actual teaching, like how many different aspects we think about in teaching here. I just remember the teacher standing at the front, either just writing reams and reams of writing on the blackboard,
Yeah.
or just dictating, just saying stuff for like a whole
Oh
hour,
my God.
and you had to just write it all, and that was what teaching was. So
Yeah. Oh, dictation every
oh my
day.
god! Like, and you sit there, and I just remember. I remember the fear being the English kid there, and I hadn't done loads of Spanish before. Just sitting there going, I missed like a word, and then I was trying to catch up on that word, and I realised I'd then missed like a whole paragraph, and then I just randomly start mid paragraph on another. I'm like, well, that's that then, and then so I
Yeah.
don't know that bit.
Yeah.
um,
So we had, it's probably the exact same experience, you know. So I think I remember my first day, like, so my mum and dad just decided to move to Spain. There was no,
right,
as far as I'm aware, there's no logic behind it other than,
right,
you know, it'd be a nice experience and, you
yeah,
know, why not sort of thing. I think,
yeah,
there's probably something. But yeah, we ended up there. I think we moved in the July and obviously school starts in the September, like midway through.
yeah,
I just remember the first day just being totally, like, I had no Spanish. I mean, I don't know if you remember these really, really specific, um, like TV adverts where they had like all of the films and they were in like 27 languages. It was this
right,
weird cartoon. I don't know if you
yeah,
remember it. I can't
right,
remember the name of it. But we'd done that at home and we had like the cassettes,
yeah, yeah.
but it just didn't help at all.
No.
And day one, I remember like colouring in this penguin in like maths because I could only do maths because that was, you know, it's international, isn't it? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
quite easy.
yeah,
But yeah, like homework would be take your textbook home, learn this entire spread off by heart,
yeah,
and then the next day you're having 10 questions.
yeah.
And you know,
Just
and yeah,
bizarre. It's
it's
just
so
not. If
confusing.
you put that in a classroom here now, it's just like, well, that's just not teaching. It's just
Well, it nearly came back to it with direct instruction, didn't it? It's, you
yeah,
know, we
yeah,
sort of, I suppose there's probably genuine merit to it. Because again, even in
yeah.
the exams where they're bringing in dictation tasks and things like
Mm.
that, there must be some merit.
I guess there as well. There was the motivation through not having to stay in the same year until you were
Yeah,
18, basically. Like that was the other thing. When I started when I was 13, looking around the classroom, and there's like 17-year-olds sitting there who had just been kept back. I was like, oh right, okay.
yeah.
There is a motivation there to actually pass. So maybe that's it. Maybe there is a. I think if we had that here slightly, I think you would get.
Well, yeah, it's like,
you know,
so one of the first things that I kind of really got wrong as a head of department was that I'd kind of gone in with this idea of, I've got my idea, I want to change. I mean, and look, the position I was in, there wasn't much that was consistent. So everyone was doing kind of their own thing and, pretty well. Like it's, not a criticism of the people or
yeah,
what came before, but from my understanding of a department based on like my experience in English was that everyone should be kind of approaching things the same way
yeah,
at a school, so that if a kid gets moved into a different class,
mm,
they can
mm.
pick up seamlessly, right? And they don't feel like they've got to learn how to
Yeah.
learn
I mean,
again.
at least, yeah, minimum the same principles, really, isn't it? You want
Yeah.
everybody to be singing from the same hymn sheet, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Mm,
I'd kind of gone in there with this idea, and the thing that kind of a lot of my so I've done a few different like consultations in schools, like with heads of department, or I've done like just different talks of like
mm,
being a head of department and introducing EPI.
mm.
And there's this kind of metaphor of like Chesterton's Bridge. I don't know if you ever.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. No.
So it's this kind of like I don't know if it's philosophical, but it strikes me as philosophical.
It
It's
feels philosophical.
yeah, it feels deep. Yeah, it's perspective of like if you're walking through a woods or a forest or something, and you find not a bridge, a gate. If you find this gate, there's a temptation to kind of immediately tear down the gate,
Mm,
but it might be that gate kind of has some value that you can't see.
right.
And so my advice now to like people introducing EPI or heads of department that want to change things is kind of like make sure that you've understood what are the gates that currently exist at your school, and don't just tear them down straight away.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
might be that like,
Analyze first, and
because I think I went in probably too naive, I think too confident in what you're doing, and probably didn't. And that's just something you learn with experience, isn't it? But I think it's the
absolutely.
same thing when you look at teaching methods from the past. there must have been some reason they were doing it. I can't imagine that all teachers were just like, what's the laziest way I could possibly deliver this information? And yeah, they wouldn't have had such research on like pedagogy and like learning, but
No.
enough of it would have been about. So there's probably some genuine merits. But I remember like doing maths in Spain or like verb conjugations, and I can just still remember like my primary school teacher Manoli being like, Ryan, sal, and like you have to just go to the front of the class, and then they just like give me like hacer in the pretérito, and you're like, okay, ether, whatever, and you just have to go. And if you got it wrong, so embarrassing.
Yeah.
I think they do that with maths. They do it with like in lengua castellana. They do it in Valencian, like you go up and do Valencian conjugations and things like that. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it now, but I even started doing that a little bit with my classes with EPI, like trying to create like I don't know, like a culture that allows errors. So not punishing people for getting it wrong, but making it so normal that if we all stood up, we're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And
it's interesting you say that. Like that is something I bang on about that all the time in class. Just you're going to make mistakes, and I want you to. I want you to lose that fear, and I think that fear is what, especially English people learning languages. There's a fear of, if I'm not saying it perfectly, I just won't say it at all. I just won't say anything, and I'll just rely on them understanding what I'm saying. And if we can instill that in kids, just to a culture of it's all right to make a mistake, it's all right to go for it and get it wrong.
It's obviously everyone wants to be understood, right? And I think the use of I think Barry Smith says this as well. The unique problem that English students face is that they don't necessarily have to learn a language. If we're just really honest about it, right? You could go your entire life as an English speaker, holidaying around Europe, maybe in other places, and you've got this just immediate ability where people are going to try and, I don't know whether they're trying to actively comfort you, but they're at least trying to make their own lives easier with learning English. And it's so instilled in other places that, to motivate an English student to learn a language is, I would say, possibly the most complex skill in a school.
Yeah.
Because some schools make it like obligatory and some don't. Some even within schools, certain students have to do it, certain students don't.
Yeah.
Then you end up in this scenario where like one of the biggest problems with language as a GCSE is that it's so academic that it goes beyond the reason why anyone would learn a language in the first place, which is just to enjoy. My uncle is learning Greek right now. He's like 50.
Right.
And he's not going to do a GCSE in Greek. But when he goes to Greece, he just wants to be able to kind of like chat and make
which is the primary is actually the primary purpose. It should be. I mean, that's what it's. Students need to know that. Yeah, it is. You do need to pass your exam. It is important. It sets you up. But ultimately, as a life skill, it's just you can't beat that. And
the doors that it opens. So us having this conversation now. The sort of work that you and I have done together with the language gym and things like that, the amount of conversation, even people I've met at different schools, just because of this, and I know mainly it's an academic thing, but it's a subculture within academia of language speakers.
Yeah.
But even in my own personal life, I every now and again join a Spanish Liverpool fan podcast.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a huge viewership, but it's quite specific.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, it just opens doors all the time. You walk around any big supermarket, I find you hear people speaking different languages all the time.
Yeah.
I was getting a taxi home the other day, and the guy just randomly happens to speak like Spanish, and you just, but motivating English students who have got no, like even familial push on it.
Yeah.
The parents probably aren't as interested.
No.
And maybe it's like anything. If you learn a little bit, you become interested. But in schools, it seems to be, you do Key Stage 3, it's compulsory.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not past that.
I
think making it compulsory might not even help.
It's the we're all the same, really. If we're going to learn something, we kind of want to know what the purpose is for it. And if we can't see that purpose straight away, then it's hard to then get the engagement. But I mean, especially at parents, even you've probably thought of in the past, the thing I always get with parents, they go, "Oh, I wish I'd have worked hard at languages in school. I wish I'd have done better," because you don't actually realise until your late 20s, 30s that it is actually a useful thing. before that point, it's kind of like, unless you are really into languages and it's like your thing, I think you don't realize before that point, unless you are told this is important, this is how you'll use it.
Yeah.
So I think I guess I was lucky, and like same with you, we had that opportunity to learn it, and we had a reason to, and we were exposed to a lot more from that age that we naturally had to. But yeah, I think that is really tricky, the engagement. But
That's
yeah,
why EPI is so good, though.
mm,
Is for like, again, and this is why I just assumed everyone did it. Is that my experience? And again, part of it is, I think, something that'd be interesting to talk about as well. Is how English students receive different teachers in languages. I think, like for me, I've always felt that I've had a pretty decent profile from the beginning, just because I happen to be like a native English speaker, which always helps.
yeah.
I'm, not as much anymore, but previously I was quite a young guy. And, because my Spanish is native and I've got like a cultural understanding of it as well.
Yeah.
I felt like I can always bring like a sort of a mix of authenticity and then,
Definitely
the abstract, right?
100%.
And obviously not every language teacher's got that.
Yeah.
But with EPI, I've always felt that, that you can call them games or whatever. It doesn't. I mean, everything's a game, isn't it? Anyone sat in a school wearing a uniform is playing some big game.
Yeah, exactly.
Of like,
and I think
robbers,
that's
really.
what it is. That's what the games and the activities and all those different things, which have they're progressive. They challenge. They're fun. I think they're the things that really I found, and the clear sequencing as well. They can actually see, oh, I'm getting better, and now I'm working on this stage, and I think that's what really gets them engaged and motivated. But yeah, obviously you can see that as well with your. So I was going to ask about how those resources. Obviously, you've worked on the trilogy books, and with the EPI methodology. So you're doing tutoring mainly now.
Yeah, so right? I've got I'm a very fortunate position that I've managed to essentially take a risk and launch my own kind of I've got a tutoring company that me and my wife work on together, and we work, we teach loads of subjects through it, and we have like contacts in, we teach a lot of like kids in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and obviously because everything's globalized now, you can find people all the time. So I teach some. I probably teach half and half Spanish and English. And, a lot of the students, well, I'll say all of the students that I teach Spanish to, I sort of recommend the books, obviously. And it has nothing to do with me. It's separate. I'm a freelance author at the end of the day. So, they can do whatever they want when they buy them. But I use them in my own tutoring. And I think if you're going to write something and then use it, there's not much more truth that you need to find. I'm not writing it and then flogging it and going, oh well.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And I suppose the original kind of like opportunity that I think Gianfranco and the language gym were sort of gracious enough to give me was because I was at one of the training sessions and I brought with me some like booklets that I'd created for my own school.
Oh right.
And it was very inspired by Hannah Pinkham. I think it's Hannah Pinkham. There's also a Hannah Newnham out there, and I always get the two mixed up. So I shout out to both of them anyway.
Credits to the Hannahs.
Yeah, lots of Hannahs in NFL. But they're really good. So we kind of wrote. I had this character Joaquin, who he'd like. I can't remember. We changed it now in the second year. It was why he'd moved away, and he was writing a letter to his friends saying like what his life in England's like now. And we would play the role of the friend writing back or whatever. And I basically took this series of these booklets to ask for feedback. Am I doing it right, sort of thing? I think John Frank from there sort of said, well, this is kind of what we're about to start working on anyway. That's
good then. Yeah. So you never know where these opportunities are going to come from, do you? I suppose so.
Well, it was not to be too dramatic here, but you've got like in teaching, you've got like heroes, if you know what I mean. And when you spend so long, like you listen to someone speak and you're like, yeah, I totally agree. And they, in a sense, they've achieved a lot and they've worked hard to achieve what they've achieved. And then those people to say, yeah, not only do I think you're on the right track, I think that's kind of what we were going for anyway. So
absolutely,
let's work together on it.
It sort of motivates you to go, oh, I'm doing the right thing. I'm on the right track. And
yeah, I was just happy to be able to kind of. I think the main thing was that I was trying to sell this to like, staff and my own school, the kids in my own school, and to kind of be steadfast in the fact that it's not perfect API, and it's not always intentioned and even executed the way that I would do it now in hindsight. And I'm not saying it didn't get like a language stamp of approval that we printed or anything, but just to know that,
yeah, it's got the backing. It's
it's at least on the right track, and that me as a person, the person creating it, is trusted enough to then create a central resource, or at least take part in the creation of the central resource. And kind of share ideas and genuinely be heard and listened to and things like that. It kind of, you create these resources that you use yourself.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm using them I'm using them today in class. And it's, like you said, for me as well, is exactly the same, having the opportunity to work on the speaking stuff. And I think it's like you've already done the work to prepare the activities, so you should use them.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of it, is that when you kind of sit like drafting the work for the books, then sharing it with the other sort of co-authors and stakeholders and things like that, the entire the audience that you think of is always, what would I do with my class?
Yeah,
and then kind of going, okay, well, how can I make this sort of generic enough that any diverse class, or it can be adjusted at least, and you kind of go, I mean, essentially human memory works in a pretty specific way. So as long as you kind of follow it's not, I mean, it sounds like it's not rocket science to say, well, the first thing we do is we show you what to do, and then slowly but surely we allow you to do it.
That's what teaching is, isn't it? I think what was always the thing that I found early on in my teaching was you're kind of pushed into doing is expecting so much from one lesson, expecting to be able to present something, them to be able to quickly do a bit of practice, and then to be able to do it straight away. And that just, it never sat well with me. I was like, how on earth can anyone, and topic wise, going from one topic to another so fast, it's like, how on earth can anyone pick up a language, if anything, in that short space of time? So I think that the sequence over a period of time, that's what really works,
Well, there's a real problem with, again, I don't think I'm the solution to it, but I'd at least like to complain a little bit and then maybe try and cope with it. There's a real problem with languages teaching generally, given the fact that languages are thousands of years old, and there still isn't a sort of correct sequence that we can just sort of share with each other. Everyone's got their own. I'm going to do even the existence of a topic, as if like when you're a kid. Like I've got, I said, 3 kids, so I speak to my children. I speak to them in Spanish at home. I've never spoken to them in English. It would be really weird to do it. My wife speaks to them in English, and these tiny little bilingual children running around, kind of speaking half in one, half in the other. Although they dominate English much more, but they they can understand me with total fluency, right? And they kind of bring in words every now and again. But to kind of see them, I wouldn't sit and teach them Spanish in topics.
Yeah, true. That is true.
And like when you take a kid in at year 7 who's doing Spanish for the first time, they're 11, but their Spanish reading age isn't 11. Their Spanish reading age is essentially 0 with the cognition of an 11-year-old.
Exactly that.
And, so if you wouldn't do it with a Spanish toddler, why would you do it?
I think that's something that gets missed as well, like the expectation that's put on these students when realistically they're, like you said, they're at 0 when they're starting, and they've nothing to really link that language to. They've never really had exposure to it, and you're right. It's got to be in a communicative way, hasn't it? It's got to be in a natural process to give them a chance to actually pick it up.
Well, so I try and study some languages in my own time, right? And German is my main thing. I try and practice it every day,
right?
Very lazily often, to be honest. But if I was going to go into a German lesson today, I think there's almost this weird expectation of year 7 students that sort of by Christmas they should be able to kind of introduce themselves and their whole family.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I mean, I don't know if anyone would understand the complexity of doing that.
Yeah. How much actually goes into that? Yeah.
Well, the real problem is that, like, because you're learning a language, like anything, the language isn't built perfectly. It's actually built very imperfectly. So, the main verbs that you're going to be using, they're all irregular.
Yeah.
Because they're the main verbs. Like, by default, by over usage, as communities with sort of vast different accents and
Yeah.
other like languages, things like that. You know, for you to introduce yourself, you know, my name is Ben or my name is Ryan,
Mm.
you're already doing some really complicated linguistic things that,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Using reflexive things that you've
yeah,
never had to think about in your life before,
and yeah, you don't
Like,
actually, you don't teach it grammatically straight away,
yeah.
but even to teach that, it kind of creates these schemas that you then have to like kind of
Mm.
undo. I mean, how
Mm.
many students in year 11 or year 10 still say things like me prefiero?
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
how is this? And again, because it's complicated,
Mm.
but it kind of, yeah, I mean, the expectations for academic qualifications in languages in the
Mm.
UK, I would say are like, I would actually say they're pretty, I mean, I know people do attain them, but they're pretty unattainable. I think
Mm.
it's a
Oh
very
yeah. Yeah.
strict, specific discipline.
Which why the majority of students not carry on to A level after they've done GCSE? Why does even less people then carry on to the university after A level? It's just it's unreachable, isn't it? I don't really know why it's made like that. It's making it inaccessible, I feel.
Well, I'd be very interested to know if we could. I mean, I don't know who could possibly do this, but you know, if anyone does listen to this and decides, you know, this is true, let's get Ben and Ryan on it. I would love to do some research across all language students in the UK at GCSE
Mm,
and try and gauge the kids that get nines, eights, sevens. How much work do they do outside of school
mm,
to achieve that? Because I would actually begin to argue that it's potentially impossible off of the amount of lesson time dedicated in school to achieve that
yeah,
independently.
yeah,
And then I'd be
absolutely.
interested to know as well, in that case, what's the recommended study time at home
Mm,
in order to attain it?
yeah,
Because again, a lot of, you know, maybe there's an education problem in the UK,
mm,
but the kids get like 16 exams, and
yeah,
naturally languages is something that it just feels like an art form that's treated like a science almost.
yeah.
You know, that you can't go in and express yourself really because you've
No.
got to like, you know, I'm what did you do last summer? Well, I need to remember to use like a modal verb and talk in
Mm,
the third. It's like, well, no one would do that.
yeah.
Um,
What's that? Yeah, what would actually be real things they need? That's sometimes a bit lost, isn't it? End up
yeah,
just
well,
teaching
it's
to the
forced
exam.
communication, isn't it? Because
Mm,
if I say to you, oh, we're going to do a role play, Ben, and I say
mm,
to you, hi, how are you today? You
mm.
know, your response is, yeah, I'm okay. How are you? It's not, there is a problem in my bedroom.
Yeah.
You know, it's very, very, and again, I sympathise heavily with the kind of like examples because what you're supposed to do,
Yeah.
that's the agreed
Yeah.
thing, and they put a mate. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the textbooks that they create. You know, the amount of work that must go into that. I mean, you've created a textbook. I've
Mm.
created. You know, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the people that are creating this are creating it from the same place that we're creating our things
Mm.
from.
Mm.
It just feels like a very difficult task
Yeah.
to get
To
English
get it right.
students, particularly when, you know, I mean, in year 7, how many classes in England are taught by cover teachers and they
Well,
learn
yeah,
colours
because
by,
they
you
can't
know,
get the teachers because all that stuff. It's a big you know what? It's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Really, if you
yeah,
think about it, the lack of engagement in languages leading to teachers struggling to teach it, to people not, from people not even taking it up at you for degrees, not getting it to that level. You're not going to get teachers if you haven't got people coming through. It's a massive thing to try and change, isn't it? And I think not necessarily just lobbing more money at getting trainee teachers. I don't think that's the answer. I think it's coming from a lot further back than that, really.
yeah. But this is sort of goes back to the, you know, let's sympathise again with the average British student. You know, you can't force someone to want to do something,
Mm,
particularly if you literally can't force them. I mean, you probably
yeah.
could force them. There
Mm,
are ways of doing it.
mm,
I don't think it's going to happen now.
no.
But it's kind of like, yeah, like in terms of the currency that it holds, it's you have to really enjoy it, and like you probably meet students every year, and everyone that teaches language meets students every year that will find it will spark something in them, and at the end of the day, maybe it's just for them, and everyone
Mm,
gets put through it, but maybe it's just for those kids or whatever. And this is like the hypocrisy. Maybe I feel, maybe you feel as well. The fact that, like I say, I didn't learn it. I just grew up in Spain. You know,
yeah.
um, thankfully I've remembered it. You know, when I moved back to England in my
Mm,
teenage years, I maybe didn't use it for a couple of years, and thankfully I held on to it enough to kind of, you know, keep revisiting it and improve now.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
speaking to my own kids, like
Mm.
I'm learning so much from them as they speak as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating problem
Yeah, it
to
is.
have, and each teacher can solve it on their own from like the ground up.
Mm.
With the correct kind of approach to teaching. I mean, again, if you kind of manage to convince every teacher to say, look, we're here to kind of teach the kids to be able to speak Spanish or French or whatever the language is, but we're here to get them communicating. Like writing things down. Okay, maybe that's not necessary, but be really brave with it and go,
Yeah.
what would I want to do? What would I, or
Mm.
what would the average kid do? I mean, one of the things that I would always bang on about in my first kind of experience as a head of languages was getting rid of textbooks. So just getting rid of textbooks, getting rid of exercise books, and just kind of going, look, what are we writing things down for?
Mm.
Are you gonna look back at this?
Yeah.
Because if you're gonna write down verb conjugations, just buy a verb conjugation book.
Yeah, it's
They're
already
printed
done.
really
Yeah.
nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that you're ultimately getting them to write down to show someone else, isn't it? It's like to demonstrate to someone else, oh yeah, look, they're doing work. Because
But that's what you were talking about the the conveniently timed 50-minute to an hour and 40 slot that you get depending on what school you're in.
Yeah.
And in that time, students should adequately display a level of progress, and you end up kind of trying to refine the content around the time scale.
Yeah.
And that's just not really.
And also, you're trying to, like, if you, like you're saying about how much lesson time and curriculum time it gets, you're trying to teach a brand new subject, something that's absolutely brand new to them, in less time than a subject that they've already had previous exposure to. If you think of maths or science, they've had years of doing that already, yet they're expected to reach higher levels, or the same levels at least, in a language which is something completely abstract to them, in a lot less time. And I'll get 2 hours a week with Key Stage 3, which is more than some schools get. Even sometimes it's an hour a week. It's like I don't think you can learn anything pretty much in that time.
Especially when it's delivered in a foreign language.
Yeah.
You've always got to learn how to learn before you even start.
Yeah.
It's like you could pick up geography in year 7, but someone's speaking to you in your native language.
True. You're not. Learning brand new words. That's another level, isn't it?
I think, to be honest, that if you kind of took the GCSE expectations and applied those to A level instead, I think you'd do all right. If Key Stage 3 was the kind of end point for GCSE, I think you get a lot more kids doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's true. If you did a shift up sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of understand a little bit. Because I wonder whether when these examinations were first created, whether it was compulsory. I don't know. I'd have to research the history of it, and then maybe I'm just ignorant, and that happens quite often actually. But when you try and just think about how could you improve it, and again, this is the whole gate metaphor earlier. It must exist they must have tried it before and gone, look, it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
you have that. It's like having foundation higher split. Every teacher is going to complain every year about there's this, and there was this one kid that couldn't they sort of thing. And obviously maths teachers have the same thing. It's it's fundamentally quite tricky.
Yeah, definitely.
But again, what's the silver bullet? I don't know, but I think EPI helps.
Yeah, because I'm glad that is spreading wider now, because I do think it is. It's clearly shows success, and children enjoying. Ultimately, kids there's got to be some element of enjoying what you learn. I think there is that as well. I've noticed that a lot more. The interaction with it is so much more positive since I've been using EPI. But yeah, it's not saying that that's the only option in the world, but like that, I'm finding for me that has worked best, and in the schools I've worked in, that's it's been really, really successful. So, but yeah, it's hard to come up with a solution to it.
You can't force teachers to behave in a certain way, and God knows teachers. They're essentially artists, right? And you can't tell an artist to paint in a certain way or whatever. It's not right. It's not like a corporate career.
No.
You're with kids, lots of kids every day. It's a really tricky thing to navigate.
Yeah.
And if someone on top of that is then saying, look, you must deliver it this way, you've got to have a level of independence.
Definitely.
And all EPI is just someone who was a teacher found that, when they applied their understanding of memory principles, it started working. And someone who's just really passionate and has put just so much into it. So we're traveling around the world, delivering, like preaching almost, saying, look, really, it works. Like, I'm not, just do it and try it. And if you don't like it, change it, whatever, it's fine.
And that's what, like, you've been on the courses. When you sit there after one of those days, your brain is entirely full of stuff, which is great. And then, but automatically you start thinking, right, how can I apply this? What can I? That's the power of it. You can see how you can use it straight away. You're not having to then, I don't know. You can do a lot more extensive research of it, but you can just do it. You can go, all right, I can do these activities, I can get these resources, and I can use them.
That's the thing. I don't know if this is the same for the schools that you've worked at, but teaching in the UK there's lots of stigmas around things like buying resources. Like there's a huge trend, and I was part of this trend where everything's got to be created in-house. We have to, it represents our community, things like that. But one of the things that I think that the language team has done so well is that they're now providing resources for everything. So you've got a textbook that you could follow for topics. You've got a textbook for speaking exercises. You've got a textbook for the grammatical explanations, which to me just serve as like a script that you can share with your teachers and say, how do we feel? Do you think this is a fair explanation that we should all deliver? And if not, go from there. You've got downloadable and editable PowerPoints, should you subscribe, that you can use. And it's kind of that thing I said earlier about, the language is a lot older than modern teaching pedagogy. Maybe just take someone's resources they're literally giving to and saying, not only
they are excellent as well. We literally use a combo of all those things. We use Sentence Builder's website as well as like a central thing to present the language, and it's just like and the beauty of it's done, and it all links together. And I think that's something I haven't seen in other resources, how well it all links together. So it gives you, like a whole menu of options and activities that each teacher can tailor it to their own preferences, can't they, as well, which I think is really nice.
Well, you can skip activities, you can do more of one activity. It's planned bottom down and top up. You've got an overall sequence that you plan from the bottom up. This is just anecdotal, but one of the teachers that was in my department before, she was great, trainee, and she'd bought in to this kind of way of doing it. And she planned a lesson that I would happily put into a textbook. Now I'd happily put it into a book. It was really good. It's just because it's just the sequence, right? And I would teach her PowerPoints like slide for slide. I wouldn't, change, because they're just activities at the end of the day. I'd skip the activities live. I'd maybe alter them. I'd do games again and just check misunderstandings. But we had offsetting, and I just did this lesson just totally like no textbooks, nothing, just mini whiteboards and speaking. And I just felt so confident with what I was doing, because it was just like I could explain to anybody. If you want to teach a language, you get them, you show them how to do it, and they do it. It's not. I don't know why they'd have to write anything down to say something out loud.
No, definitely.
But look, you could. But it's so complicated. I'm sure you'll solve it throughout your podcast.
We'll see. I don't know. It's great getting people's different perspectives on, not only their language journey and what got them into it, because obviously that does reflect in, it's not always the standard way people end up getting into languages, but also people's perspectives on where languages are at the moment, how it's being taught in the UK, what could be done. And, we're all just trying to make our little difference to it, hopefully. And, whether you're a classroom teacher or whatever, you're trying to contribute your bit, aren't you? I think it is important to talk about it as well, because unless we talk about it, everyone's just going to think everything's absolutely fine.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's like, I'd be happy to be told, no, that's wrong. Cool.
Just literally, you get one chance. You want to try and make a difference, try and contribute something positive, don't you, to something you're passionate about. So,
like I say, for the same, it sounds like the same thing for you. Like, this is my identity in a lot of ways. Enjoying languages. It's sort of makes you feel like, I don't know, you are you.
Yeah.
To try and convey that to kids. maybe sometimes it's just not them.
Yeah. No, exactly. So it's about trying to promote from your own perspective, isn't it? I think that's where you obviously have that relatability as well, which I think is really important. But obviously, that varies between teachers, I suppose.
Just I know you probably got to go. I've got to go as well. Just one more thing, right?
Yeah.
So at the start of this journey, I had a phone call with Barry Smith, who it's just amazing, right? And before this, I'd spent the first however long saying languages are very important. Everyone must learn language. And on the phone, he basically said the same thing to me, but then said what I said, repeated what he'd said. Where I said, they're English kids. It's different. And it just totally changed my opinion on it completely. And then I felt like I could be much more empathetic with the students in front of me.
Yeah.
And say, look, I don't say every lesson. Look, I know you don't want to be here because that's a disaster.
Yeah.
But, kind of at least being aware that, it is your job to motivate them as well.
Yeah.
It'd be lovely if they turned up all motivated.
Yeah.
But
I don't know when that
I
happens.
don't know if that's very realistic or not.
Let's be real.
So, that's why I'd say EPI is motivational. But
yeah, definitely. All right, Ryan. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking to you. I'm sure we'll catch up again on this. We've got lots we can talk about, but I really appreciate your time coming on here today. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of Language Sofa Podcast. Thank you to Ryan for your input and fascinating conversation. See you later.